So I need to replace the output shaft bearing of my Polaris Scrambler 400. The original one has been destroyed for a long time. It's ovaled out, it's not rebuildable, and most importantly, it doesn't have bearings on the inside. It used just bushings that just rode around in here, and sometime between 1996 and now, it exploded, and the previous owner did nothing. So the seals were completely gone, both bushings were gone, and the shaft was a little bit chewed up. So naturally, I went on the internet and tried to order a new one, and I found the reproduction Chinese one. So I ordered that. I got it. It had seals, the new bushings inside, and I went to put it on, and it wouldn't even fit over the shaft. The inside diameter of the bushings were too small, so it didn't even fit. I had to actually just sand the crap out of them to even get it to go on. And then I found the holes didn't even line up, so the bolts wouldn't go through. So I filed them to fit the actual Polaris Scrambler chassis there. And then I tightened it down, and my rear wheel wouldn't spin very well. And it turned out the centerpiece, it must have been bored wrong, because I used the shims that came with it. I used extra washers. I got it kind of good, but it never really felt right, and it definitely wasn't free spinning enough for my liking. So I sent it back. I got 3 bearings to build my own. I saw a post about this on Facebook, but nobody really lists the parts. So these were 7/8 bearing and a collar, I believe. I'll link it all in the end. But I got 3 styles, and I'm going to try and make one work. So this one I've seen used a couple times. It's a bit flimsy. Personally, I don't think it would work very well. On top of that, it doesn't really line up. If it was a little bit wider, it'd be good. But because it's so small, I would have to make a plate and maybe weld it to the plate and then bolt it together. I don't know. But then it would bring it out just a bit much, and that's getting pretty close to the brake rotor too. So I don't think I'm going to end up using this. Then I found this big square one. I thought, well, it's a big square one. The grease nipple is stopping it from going in there, so obviously this isn't going to fit super well. It kind of clears the bolt, but I'd have to notch it there. So I was like, well, maybe if I go diagonally and put this over top, I could trace the shape out and then just cut out a whole new one. And then if that's still too thick, I could just angle grinder these guys down a bit, and that would probably work. But that's a lot of cutting. And then I kind of counted on using that square one, but then I got looking at this one with those 2 holes on it, and it fits really well. I took the grease fitting out. That's going to be, I'll have to say why in a little bit. That just fits on there so well, and the holes are pretty close. I'm gonna have to drill them a little bit, but it's pretty good. And better yet, the brake also fits. So this actually clearances this disc. It's actually got some inward play, so it's going in before it hits the back of that bearing. I'm going to press the brake and it'll line it up. So it should be as square as it can be with the brake, so I can push it in just ever so slightly, so it's like very, very close. The problem's going to be when the inner pad wears down, the disc is going to want to go with it, right? So I'm going to have to clearance that a bit. And to do that, I'm only going to have to grind down the gusset thing on the top side. So on the top, it has that there. So look at it from the side. That's about a brake pad width right there. So I'm just gonna probably just grind all this whole thing down to be equal with this bottom spot here. And I believe that will be just fine. And if I need to take it further, I can just grind this guy down right here. But I think that's pretty much it. I think that's all I'm going to need. I can quickly show what the spacing is for the bolts. So before, I don't know if it's going to cooperate. So before, it's going to be a finger's width. If I push this together, then it looks like a standard size bolt would probably go in there and clear. But as I said, as the inner pad wears down, everything's going to want to go this way a little bit. So I'm going to, after I grind down this this inside gusset thing here, I think it's just going to be perfect, to be honest. And as for the hole spacing, that one's pretty close, right? And that one down there is also pretty close. So I'm just gonna have to slot the holes out a little bit.
So after that, I looked at the way the holes on the bearing lined up with the holes on the chassis, and it became quite apparent that the heads of the bolt would likely interfere with the bearing. It would be too close after I modified the holes on the bearing. So what I did was I put the bearing on the shaft and I scribed the holes onto the chassis. And then I just used like a file and a Dremel tool to hog it out a little bit. And now the bolts, they line up just fine. One thing I will say though is if you're looking at this and you're like, okay, I really don't want to modify my chassis. Like, how am I going to revert this back to stock? I probably wouldn't recommend doing it. I can fill all this back in with weld fairly easily. So if you have a welding friend that can help you, it might be worth asking them if they'd be willing to do this in the future. Or if you have no way of doing it, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it. Here's the bearing after I modified it. I took the top surface down to be level with the bottom surface. It didn't take very long with the angle grinder. It's a little bit hard to keep both sides at even thickness. I did my best with my digital calipers and my calibrated eyeball, and I ended up being a little bit thinner than I wanted to. I got down a little bit more than I wanted to, but it works. And that only happened because angle grinders. If you had a mill, this would be a heck of a lot easier though. It'd be a lot more even, that's for sure. Here's a shot from the side. Something else to consider with these bearings is when you buy them, they're a little bit rough. It's only like a $13 part from Amazon, right? So the inside where the bearing is supposed to float and be able to pivot, it's a little bit rough. So when you get it, you stick one of these ears in a vise, and you take a screwdriver and you stick it through the center of the bearing and you twist in a different direction, and a pin that is attached to the actual bearing itself pops out of this slot and you can remove the bearing. Then what I did was I cleaned this up really good with some brake clean and a shop towel, and then I lubed all this up with bearing grease. I cleaned the bearing itself off, reinserted it, and then I worked it around with the screwdriver and it loosened up quite a lot. So I'd recommend doing that first as well. before you put it on the quad, just so it actually floats well. And the next thing is the actual grease nipple itself. It doesn't line up in a very good spot, so if you're a handy guy, you can just drill a new one and plug this one, but I used the original one. It didn't bother me too much. The only thing is you have to grease it beforehand, so put a decent amount of grease in there, spin it around a bunch, and then take the nipple itself out. Then you can put it onto the shaft in the orientation it's supposed to be. So this nipple actually ends up pointing downwards on mine. And when it's pointing downwards, you have to rotate it a little bit past where the bolts would line up. And then you can turn the grease nipple in, rotate it back to the correct orientation, and then put the bolts through it and tighten them. It's a bit of a pain, but it's not the worst. I would do it again. Then the next thing is the actual bolt holes on this bearing housing are quite large. So what I ended up doing was I found a metal pipe that would fit inside of it, and I used it as a bushing. So I could use a smaller bolt, because this is the one without the bushing. The bolts that I had to put into this thing were ridiculous. They were like Tractor Supply like hardware bolts, so they were like freaking twice the size of this almost. These ones are still way too big for the application, but they fit just fine, so I used them.
Here it is all back together. Everything's spinning quite nicely. It was spinning better before the brake caliper went on. Here's behind it, so that is probably still a finger's width of space, so you can kind of contrast if this will focus. You can see where the head of the bolt is and how it stops kind of below the brake pad width, so even with wear it won't hit that. You can see the space between the brake rotor and the inner race, so you got all that space right there. It's pretty good. It fit pretty good in the end. The actual bearing has these two grub screws that lock it to the shaft. I cranked on them pretty tight, and I'm going to see how well it holds up. It seems to spin really well. I had my doubts about these two screws. I thought I was going to have to replace them, maybe drill and tap for a larger, harder bolt, but this actually works really good, so I think I'm just going to leave it for now.
I put a witness mark on the shaft just to make sure it didn't spin while I was driving, and I have a few rides on the quad now. I haven't beat on it too hard as I'm still braking in the engine, but it so far hasn't moved at all. Still spins well, nothing's broken. If it breaks in the future, I'll report back here.